Okay, so this is a little brief tutorial about how to conduct a literature review. There are some questions about that, and so I thought I'd go through and give you a brief tutorial on that. So the first question then is, what is the literature review? What am I looking for in this paper? And essentially what you're going to want to know is kind of the answer to your question in terms of what has already been done. So what research has already been done to respond to the question that you proposed. So you're going to be wanting to think about what has been published, what are the strengths and weaknesses of what's already been published. Do the different pieces agree with each other on the conclusions? Do they disagree? We also need to consider that it is not a list of everything available on the topic, and it is not just a set of summaries. I do not want to see just this article summarized, next article summarized. It shouldn't be like your annotated bibliography schmooked into a bunch of paragraphs. Instead, it should be critically thinking about what has been done on the subject and where do scholars need to keep studying and where there's relatively good consensus on the response to the question that you proposed. So how to write a literature review in 6 Easy Steps. You've already done some of this, so you've already chosen your topic, which is great, and I've given you all feedback on that, so that's a good start. You've also narrowed down the question that you need, which we've done. Please feel free to shoot over any amendments to your question if you have any questions. And we've already found literature reviews, or literature to read, so that's good. You've all done that. So hopefully before you submitted your annotated bibliography, you have read critically each of the 10 articles that you've found, articles or books or whatnot. One thing I would suggest, and I'll pop this on the Moodle, is I have a reading template, just like the one that I usually hand out, but it includes an area where you can suggest some criticism, some strengths and weaknesses of each piece. So I'll pop that on the Moodle, and that might be a good way to organize each of those 10 articles so that you can start to understand how they relate to each other. So let's go back here. So you're probably mostly at this stage of compiling your notes. So what you're going to want to do is look for some general trends. How do different authors respond to the question? They're going to have different answers. They're going to use different methods. They're going to take different approaches. And look for those sorts of similarities and differences between each of the authors. So some suggestions for how to really organize. Highlight some common themes in your notes with different colors and then kind of organize them based on those colors, those themes. Write it out on Post-it notes and visually lay it out if you're a real visual learner, or create a Word document that you can use to move things around. So you really need to organize and understand how you're going to be going about writing your literature review before you actually sit down to write. So it's not something you will sit down and write in one go. It's something that you will need to kind of understand how you want to organize it. And generally, your literature review in the end should look like this. So first of all, you're going to want to introduce your topic. Think about providing some sort of lead-in, something that's really going to capture the audience's attention. Why is this an important topic? Why should anybody care? Think about that why should I care question. And then introduce the topic and the question that you're going to be responding to, and then briefly kind of highlight what is going to go on in this paper. So for example, you might be talking about, well, scholars tend to take either this approach or that approach to answering this question. I think the seminar that we did on Monday did a really good job at noting that how the scholars built on each other. So you might want to give a bit of a brief kind of preview of how you're going to go about doing that. So the body of a literature, do not just copy and paste your annotations. That is not a literature review. You're going to want to discuss responses by themes or by major approaches or how they draw on each other. You might want to even think chronologically if you have literature from different time periods. You know, how are they responding to this question in the 80s versus the 90s versus the 2000s, for example, because scholarly research always builds on itself. Be sure to discuss the strengths and weaknesses of different arguments of different authors, and highlight where the scholars disagree. Are there contradictory findings in different studies, and you might want to look at maybe why is that the case? Is it because they use different cases? Is it because they use different methods? And so the body of this literature review should not be just a summary of all of the articles. It should be, where do you see major themes emerge? Where do you see agreements, disagreements, and where do you see the strengths and weaknesses? Now, in the conclusion, you can add more of kind of your own twist on things. So would you say that there is scholarly agreement on this issue? Is there a clear answer to the question, or do scholars remain divided in what they say is the answer to your question? What remains to be researched? That's a great thing to add at the end of literature reviews, is to suggest, we know this answer, but we don't know this answer. So here's something that should be researched, and how would you suggest scholars go about doing that? If you could design a study to test this remaining problem, what would you do? So that's what your literature review should look like. I am happy to take a cursory look at, some of the literature review. I won't read the entire paper ahead of time, but a week before, I'm happy to comment and give you some feedback on maybe the first page of it or whatnot. So because it's due on November 12th, that would mean sometime before the 5th. If you could get that to me, I'd be very happy to take a look. I'm also open to meeting with you in office hours, although I don't have office hours, so just send me an email and we'll find a good time. So that's all I have for you. I did promise an Easter egg, so I guess the question will be, I hadn't thought about this ahead of time, what are the 6 steps of writing a literature review? So maybe just tell me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. What are those 6 steps? Send it to me in the Moodle. There's a spot where you can message your professor. Send it to me on the Moodle, and you'll get 1 percentage bonus point out of 100 percentage points. So it's not that much, but I like to include something in here for those of you who made it to the end. So I look forward to reading your literature reviews, and please don't hesitate to ask if you have any questions.